Welcome, everybody, to the Dad's Doomsday Guide. Today, we are pleased to have Sergeant Harry Drucker from a major Los Angeles law enforcement agency here to talk about hostage negotiations, crisis negotiations in great detail. He is an expert. He's been doing this for a very long time, so we're very happy to have him. Welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Now, I guess to start, because while Tim has some law enforcement experience, I've had a little bit. We don't really know the world of hostage negotiations. You know, it's portrayed in the movies certain ways. There's a whole gambit of different scenarios you can go through about what you've been through. How did you start into that? What got you interested in that at first? Did they look for a temperament? Like, how did you become that person?
Well, going back to the 80s, I think you look at the evolution of law enforcement across the country. And I was a rookie in patrol when Rodney King happened. So a lot changed then, and some for the better, and some maybe not so. But what became pretty clear was law enforcement was going to be scrutinized quite a bit, and so looking for ways to do things smarter, and with an eye towards, unfortunately, towards liability.
Mm-hmm.
But being able to, I always, when I worked patrol, I was always try to talk somebody into my backseat if they had to go to jail rather than put them there physically.
Mm-hmm.
And
Much
so
easier.
that's kind of my way of doing things. And either maybe because I wasn't that confident in my physical skills, but it worked quite a bit. And when you've got an armed suspect barricaded, or perhaps somebody who's got a weapon who's threatening suicide, you don't want to just go rushing in. In the old days, they used to just kick the door down and go in, and ended up being dangerous for law enforcement. It's always been dangerous, but the better way is to obviously try to talk that person out to us. And so over the years, seeing these barricade situations happen, SWAT team gets called out, and then I saw what I really wasn't aware of, that we had this type of team in our agency was a team of people that would come out, and their job would be to talk the person out. And probably one thing that the movies gets wrong the most is that it isn't a negotiator. It is a team of people. So you get the person who's actually talking, but you have a whole network of people behind them that help them out. And just the fact of my wife is happy I chose this kind of part of law enforcement instead of being the one to kick the door down and run in with guns ablazing, to be kind of back in the safe zone and try to convince somebody to come out. So I saw this unit that we had, and it appealed to me, and I started to look into it. Now I'm a team leader, and so as far as how the type of people we look for, how I got into it, I'm looking for somebody who's not necessarily the golden child, or someone who's completely squeaky clean. You want somebody who's a little rough around the edges, because they're able to really empathize with somebody in crisis. It's very, one of the most difficult things is trying to empathize with a truly a bad guy, right. Somebody who's a criminal, and really what you're giving them is something that they perhaps have never gotten, and that's somebody with the willingness to listen to them. Mm-hmm. And there is a little bit of acting involved, because you got to kind of play nice with that person and earn their trust, build rapport with them, and then that leads to the ability to influence their behavior. Mm-hmm. And what they've heard so far is, come out with your hands up, you better come out or else. And what we give them as negotiators is, what's going on with you today? Are you okay? And it kind of catches them off guard. I've got a colleague from Canada who says, they're expecting Arnold Schwarzenegger, and we give him Mr. Rogers.
What is the training like for that? Like, how does that? Do you have to go to obviously school? I would assume, right?
Right. There's a bunch of different types of training. The FBI runs a great 40-hour basic class that a lot of agencies use, because the FBI does it at no cost. Mm-hmm. But there's dozens of training organizations that provide training. It's generally a week-long course. There's advanced courses that go into 2 weeks, international courses. When I started, I went up to San Jose, and it was through the university up there. But it was a program run by a former FBI agent and a former SWAT team commander, actually, from Oakland. And they you go through that type of training, and then a lot of it is networking with other negotiators, hearing about incidents, listening to tapes of actual negotiations. But to tell you the truth, the skill set is something that law enforcement does all the time, and that's using their verbal skills, and maybe just throwing a couple more tools in the toolkit as far as active listening, and then understanding that the mindset. Sure, we need to get somebody in custody, but slowing things down and actually talking to them and trying to find out either the motivation or what's happened to them that led them to that point, and getting them to understand that there is somebody there willing to listen, somebody who cares. And it's sometimes misunderstood, because sometimes that road to get to influence is a long one. And to get there, you may have to build a rapport with somebody. So you may be talking to a murderer about football or pet care or something silly like that. And so if you can imagine the commanders listening in, they're like, get to the point.
Yeah.
Tell them to come out.
Yeah.
And if you do that too quickly, then they're like, I don't know if, how's profanity in the...
Oh, it's okay. Let's go for it.
I'd say, you don't give a shit about me. I'm not going to listen to you anymore. And you can, very often you make one step forward and you get two steps back just by the slip of the tongue or the just wrong choice of words.
Have you ever, all these questions go boom, boom, boom as you're talking, but have you ever lost somebody when you're in an active negotiation, maybe early on, where you kind of made the wrong turn? Or is there always mostly a way back on track when you say two steps back? Or once you start going too far back, it's just, you've lost it?
It's definitely, that's always a possibility. I think with the understanding that time is generally on our side, any mistake, and I do, I work for a national training organization, and one of the things that in our basic class we talk about is this is not an exact science, so you will make mistakes. Almost every mistake that can be made in crisis negotiation can be solved. You can come back from them. And one of the biggest things that we teach early on is your tone of voice. That you could screw up your choice of words, but if you have the right tone of voice that exudes empathy and caring, it's not going to matter too much. I actually know, and I was at an incident where a guy was on top of a building, he had a rope tied around his neck and tied to a fixed point on the roof. And the negotiator actually said, I realize you think you may be at the end of your rope. And all of us cringed who were listening in and providing support, but it didn't matter because her tone of voice was so caring that it didn't matter. So,
So funny.
One of the first things we talk about is your tone of voice can, and now if you have the perfect choice of words and your tone is garbage, we've all encountered people who just their tone of voice, something rubs you the wrong way.
Yeah.
And we've all worked, you being in law enforcement, you get a situation that's totally chaotic and you get it all settled down, and then that one officer shows up.
I was just going to say that. We have one guy, I was like, oh no. It was like domestic issue, and I was just trying to be really calm with both, and it was just, and it's always been a very tumultuous relationship, and we've been called out there multiple times, and this guy came and just jacked up the dude, and I was like, why? He just pissed them all off, and we had to get physical with him. And it was like horrible. It was horrible. It's like textbook, the worst language you could use, not profanity-wise, but just his tone of voice, and he was angry, and he was a newer guy, and I don't think, that's his personality, and he doesn't just know how to turn it off.
Yeah, and you can hear when they answer the radio that they're on their way. They're like, you call the desk and say, can you assign him another call, please?
Yeah, I was like, oh man, it's so terrible.
So it is possible, going back to your original question, to lose somebody. I mean, we've physically lost people. I had somebody once commit suicide on the phone with me, which is not something I'd like to repeat. But
does that kind of stuff haunt you at all? I mean, in terms of like having your experience now and gone probably through so many of these calls, does stuff come back and bother you, or you just kind of take it as you're being called into obviously a volatile situation to begin with? it's like there's no blame there. It's not like a mistake was made or something grotesque.
Well, if you can step back from it unemotionally, you would think that. And I after this particular incident happened, I reached out to other people in the industry that I've known, and they were telling me exactly what I'd told people hundreds of times before. It's that person's decision, but you're always going to second guess. Law enforcement attracts these A-type personalities, and you want to win.
Yeah.
And winning for a negotiation is having that person surrender without injury to anyone. And when that doesn't happen, you question, I should have said this, I should have said this a different way. But what's important to realize is we're dealing with human behavior, and that's the wild card. You can't predict. I mean, the best predictor is past behavior, but even that, especially if you throw somebody being under the influence into the mix of either drugs or alcohol, or somebody who's mentally ill, they could turn a corner in an instant. We had a guy last week who was on top of a motel, and everyone was just assuming that he was suicidal. And just 5 minutes talking to him, you could tell he wasn't suicidal, but he was definitely had some mental illness, and he was extremely paranoid. And going through that negotiation and talking to that individual, I was making what I thought was headway, and then just one word or one phrase just completely set him off. And he had a hatch that was open on the roof, and he just slammed the hatch and stood on it. So negotiation over. In that case, since he wasn't suicidal, and after talking to him a little bit, in addition to the paranoia, there was an element of attention getting. And I advised the patrol personnel that were there. I think if we pull back most of because there's a big show. There's patrol cars, there's ambulances, fire department, the helicopters. I said, I think if we cancel the party, this guy's going to come down in short order. And so I went down the street and was doing some paperwork, and I could see the roof, and you could see the guy after all the cars left kind of going, hey, where's everybody going? And he came down in like 5 minutes.
That's hysterical.
So
Good. Like I even find myself super impatient sometimes. And it just depends on, what you're dealing with in the day and whatnot. And usually I'll try and, like you said, talk my way out of things or talk you into, and we had this is a very quick story. This one crazy older guy, he's probably in his, I would say probably late 50s. He just looked a little bit older. And he was stalking this family. Like he dated the mom at some point, but he would show up in the middle of the night, like on their backyard, playing with kids' toys or staring at their security cameras.
Yeah, very creepy story.
So they had a restraining order against him and so forth, but they could never find him.
Which of course always works.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a facade. But he was homeless somewhat, so they could never serve him with the restraining order. So we finally found him one day, and my partner and I were talking to him. And my partner's very good at talking to people, very, very good at calming them down. And I was pretty good with him. I mean, he was inviting me over to his camp to have like a drink. I mean, we were good, but he had just violated. He went into like I think Bevmo and swung at an employee when he downed some alcohol. That's what happened. So we put him under arrest for that. And as soon as he found out, we stood up, and he just changed. It was like a different person. I'm trying to calm it. He like turned and was trying to turn on me, and then I think grabbed my shirt, and then it was on, and I think I tripped over his foot, and we fell to the ground. It's such a mess. But and like in that situation, I was like, man, I don't know what I could have done a little bit different to change that outcome, but I don't know if there was anything I could have done. It was just like he had just chosen that path, and I don't know. What do you think? I mean,
I think that you don't know, and you don't know the whole history. I mean, a lot of people think that our job as police officers or negotiators, when we encounter somebody who's threatening suicide, that our job is to talk them out of it.
Right.
And they may have had a lifetime or years and years of history that's not going to go away. And so our job is more, and when I train new negotiators, I say this, it's to talk them out of it right now. Like, why now? What loose ends haven't you tied up? Because I'll tell you, if you're talking to somebody there's some level of ambivalence, and they haven't done it yet. So why not? And not to say, ask them, kind of like the Mel Gibson on the roof, do you really want to do it?
Yeah.
But really to delve into, why now? Why is today the day? And kind of show them that there's other options, and understand that most of the time, if somebody's serious about it, we're responding to that dead body call, or a hiker finds a body, and that's an unfortunate part of the law enforcement work that we have to deal with. I mean, they call us for those things, but but you never know. There's that one thing that maybe. There was a guy I was talking to very early on in my negotiation career, and this taught me to take notes and have notes right in front of me. And the suspect was had in a strange family. He was not allowed to be with his son. His son's name, and to this day, I don't know if it was Gabriel or Gilbert, but I kept calling him by the wrong name, and that was like setting him off. And like I said before, is trying to make up for that. You apologize. Hey, I'm sorry, and show that you're human. Hey, I'm a little nervous too. I don't want anything to happen to you or Gabriel. Oh, his name's Gilbert. And you keep making those mistakes, but hopefully. When you learn from that, and if it does set them off, you can, time will get them to calm down. But definitely make a note about what it was that set them off, and don't do it again. There's that old vaudeville bit, Niagara Falls. You don't want to put out there whatever that person's Niagara Falls is.
Could have had a question, because you had mentioned earlier you kind of were giving recommendations to like the commanding officer or whoever's there.
Right.
Do they always take your advice? Is there any ever kind of debate about things, or do they have to? Or like, what are the kind of the rules there?
Well, the other important thing to know is the negotiator's not in charge.
Okay.
If you watch the Negotiator movie, Kevin Spacey's character gets on the line and announces to the SWAT team, as of now, all decisions go through me. That couldn't be further from the truth. That's, because there's an incident commander who's a higher pay grade and makes those decisions. So in a perfect world, you've got the incident commander makes the decisions. You've got a tactical team commander who runs the SWAT team, and then the negotiation team commander, who they both are of equal footing, and they say, okay, we can do this. We can breach the door with, explosive breach and make entry. And the negotiator said, well, they're answering the phone and he's talking to us, 5 minutes at a time, and he's hanging up. We think we can get him if we keep going. And then that incident commander says, no, I think we're gonna go with the tactical option. So we do that all the time. And when you look back to the 70s when police negotiation started, there was this kind of big, and SWAT teams started around that same time as well. And so you had the real cops, the SWAT team, saying, you guys do your little touchy-feely thing. When you're ready for the real cops, we'll be, over here drinking coffee. And there's a little bit of that kind of rivalry that exists to this day. When the stakes are higher, when there's actual hostages, the SWAT team knows they can't just go in. There's more consideration, so they lean on the negotiator skill set a lot more. And I actually have taught SWAT teams negotiation tactics, because a lot of times they're the ones who are close in, and the guy might start yelling. We're calling on the phone, he doesn't answer. He starts yelling at one of the SWAT guys on the perimeter. There's an opportunity there to start talking.
Yeah.
So it's a good skill set to have all around. So we try to, we're all resources for the entire incident. We're acting toward the same goal, which is to resolve the incident safely and have everybody go home safely. And that includes the bad guy, which a lot of people, it's kind of trite to say, oh, who cares about him? But, and there was somebody saying that the Texas shooting at the church, where the guy took the guy down in 8 seconds or something like that. And so there was a meme that was put out there as like, here's to the American hero who saved the taxpayers, millions of dollars, not having this guy in custody. And yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. But when you're dealing with human beings, we had a bank robbery in 2002, and the guy ended up getting out of jail, and I was able to interview him. And he was it was a great information for law enforcement, hearing his perspective about about what the SWAT team was doing. And so in any case, no matter what they've done, there's something to be gained by getting them out of there safely, especially, in the order of you want innocent people safe,
Mm-hmm.
you want law enforcement safe, but we do want our suspect out of there safely as well.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's kind of a humorous question before I
Yeah.
hold, or do you have yours? Because
No,
I was
go
going to say, do you ever use your negotiation skills on your family, your kids?
Yes, and it doesn't work.
Okay.
No, actually, I use my kids as a teaching point because law enforcement in general is getting more and more of the generation that doesn't really know how to talk to people one-on-one.
Right.
So it's all electronics, social media. And so I had an incident with my daughter was really upset about something, and she wouldn't, I'm trying to put all the active listening skills out there, and it's just not working. And when I texted her, she started communicating back and forth. And we're actually seeing that in these incidents where, and it's not just young people, it's just people in general. We had a guy in his 60s that wouldn't talk, wouldn't pick up the phone, but he was texting quite a bit. And that's another thing that the SWAT team commander was like, well, you're not talking because we don't hear anything over because we give them they can hear the audio of what's going on. And they're like, well, there's nothing going on. But we were actively texting. And in fact, even using emojis, because that's what you lose in text, you lose the tone.
Mm-hmm.
And we were throwing those in there every now and then. And
Isn't that
I was going to
weird?
make a joke and say, do you ever
So
text
crazy.
a negotiation?
Yeah.
You literally have. That's crazy.
Yeah, that social media is a huge source of intelligence
Mhm.
and information, and even using whatever method you can. We prefer to have a voice-to-voice. The best communication of all is face-to-face. You've got eye contact, you've got body language, but that's the least safe for law enforcement. Even approaching somebody on a bridge who doesn't have any weapons, you get too close, they could pull you over the edge, and it's happened. And so we work with our SWAT teams and our fire departments to be tied off or have ropes or harnesses so that we can get that proximity. But if you absent a voice-to-voice conversation, you got to use any method you can to make that connection.
Have you had a close call like that where someone's tried to get at you?
Not so much on a bridge like that.
Mm-hmm.
Being smart about it, you have protections in place. There's ballistic shields and less lethal weaponry that law enforcement's been using now. That's actually saving lives left and right. So we try not to get close like that. I was talking to a guy on a roof, and I was on a ladder. And one of the things we talk about negotiations is we call it the negotiator creep, where you don't realize it, but you want to get closer to that person to communicate. And I kept going up one more rung on the ladder, and my partner was at the foot of the ladder and kind of grabbing my pant leg and yanking on it to say, hey, don't get too close. And then, we kind of went up on the roof from another direction to see, was this guy going to, was he going to bolt or try and jump if we got closer? And just over time, over the course of about 2 hours, we were able to get right up next to him. And he was non-responsive, was experiencing his first psychotic break, was hearing voices that were legitimately confusing to him. The voices that people with mental illness hear are very real to them. And for those who are, the worst of it is they never stop. Most of them are pervasively negative, negative speak about, the person. A lot of people who experience this talk about how just anything you can imagine, you're ugly, you smell, you're worthless, you should just do it. That type of, And the medications that they take don't even turn the voices off. They quiet them a little bit and make you better able to deal with them. And so this guy really wasn't suicidal. He was trying to get away from these voices, and we got closer and closer. And the plan was, we were in an area that was safe to do this, to try and grab him by the hand and handcuff him to a rail, and then the fire department would actually physically get him down with harnesses and things like that. So I guess there's some, any of us in law enforcement have had those close calls and things that are inherently dangerous. And, we owe it to our families and everybody, the public that we serve, to try and do their job as safely as we can, and understand that sometimes there's people who just are beyond help, that no matter what we do.
Yeah.
There's this whole concept of suicide by cop wasn't a thing 30 years ago. And now people are stiffing in calls or their intent is for us to kill them. And, doing our job smarter and understanding that going in, that's a possibility, kind of changes our approach, and understanding maybe the best thing is to back off for now until the crisis at hand is over. And, the example of we had the guy who had assaulted his wife and was barricaded in place with his children. The better move was to back away, and because his children weren't in danger. And the very next day, when the crisis was over, guy was more reasonable, was taken into custody.
Do you find these hostage situations, do they include family members, or is a lot of it mental illness? Is it usually just them wanting to kill themselves, or is it? Probably depends on the circumstance, but
yeah, I guess it would be different. Bank robbery, and you get there, and he's taking the people inside hostage. Versus, what do you see most? And then, to his question, are the majority, I guess, mentally ill, or are you dealing with a lot of suicides?
It's a mixed bag, and I've been doing crisis negotiation for over 23 years, and I have only had probably 4 legitimate hostage situations. Just because somebody is inside doesn't make them a hostage. It all has to do with the motivation of the subject and how they see that person. If it's a family member that they've got inside with them, if their motivation is to possibly hurt them, that's not really a hostage, because a hostage is actually an easier situation to handle, because the subject, they have value to that person, that these people or person inside are the only thing keeping the cops from busting the door down and putting tear gas and all that. So the ones we worry about are the ones where a guy's got an ex-girlfriend inside with him. He doesn't want anything from the police. He's not asking for escape or money or anything like that. So those are a little more difficult. And we've had quite a few where there's an individual inside and they're not being held against their will, but they're trying to protect. We had a mother who had a suspect who was barricaded, wanted for assault, and the mother wouldn't come out because she reads the paper, she watches the news, and if I leave him, they're going to come in here, and my son's going to end up dead. And that's a tough thing to deal with.
That's got to complicate it significantly if you have someone in there doing that.
Oh yeah.
Jeez, how'd that end up?
That one, unfortunately, that went over the course of over a day, and we could not get the mother out, and they ended up putting tear gas inside, which caused her to come out. And that individual kind of did a suicide by cop. He came out and started shooting at the tactical team members on the perimeter, and they had to protect themselves.
Yeah. By that point, it's over.
Yeah.
Moving on to like schools, because schools aren't guarded
as much as they should be.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, like they should be.
I mean, even if you look internationally, the Beslan school incident was in Eastern Europe was the worst possible situation. They had armed security there. There's a lot of people in the States that think that we should have an armed security at every school. As it is, the LA School District Police and LAPD, Sheriff's Department, we all have school resource officers, but they have to cover multiple schools. There's just not enough budget for it. Unfortunately, it comes down to that. And even with the presence of armed security, that group of suspects in Beslan, their goal was terror, and they immediately, the first thing they did was kill the armed security. Fortunately, we're really not dealing with that often at all in the States, and the mass shootings and the school shootings that we've had don't really. Our suspects are not motivated by wanting to hold people hostage. The last one that I know about was in Colorado many years ago in Platte County. I know some of the individuals who were there, and I know a father of one of the girls who was killed in that incident. And I mean, it's a nightmare. I know the podcast is about dads and dad's doomsday. So it's you can't even imagine that. And I think one thing about being in law enforcement is every law enforcement officer is a father. Most of them are fathers, or that they know of.
Exactly.
They're fathers and brothers and sons, and we're human. And you can't do a career for any length of time in law enforcement without having some type of emotional toll of kind of seeing. You go to a car accident and there's a child involved, and you see your own child in that accident. And it's that's why cops have such a demented sense of humor, because it's a protection. It's a defense mechanism to so you don't go crazy.
Absolutely.
It's tough. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've seen a lot of things that I never wanted to see and don't want to see again. Yeah, and you got to protect yourself somehow.
It just burns you. It burns your memory. Like there's, especially some dead bodies I've seen, or some accidents, and you're just like, I didn't want to see. You can't unsee it by that point. So you just got to deal with it. And I think everybody deals with it in their own way, but some guys drink, which you probably shouldn't do as much, just have hobbies, my family, but then you start throwing your family into like, oh man, what if this was them? Or like you were saying.
Well, I think we're getting on almost a different topic, but mental health and survival for law enforcement, I think rests with keeping your outside world and keeping friends outside of the job. Yeah. We've all worked with people who all they know is police work, and they, they've got the police hat and the license plate frame. It's, I've been fortunate that I'm at the tail end of a very long career, 32 years in law enforcement, gonna almost have 33 when I retire. And I think I'm reasonably sane. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy to say that, but I think staying grounded in reality and family and friends outside of and having other interests. We were talking about snow skiing and I've raced for years, and having that healthy balance, I think, is what makes just a good person in general, but a really good law enforcement officer is somebody who can relate to people on that other level. Yeah,
and you can't be bringing it home and being angry, because some of the things you see just make you angry. And then like I've even been guilty of it, where you bring it home with you and you just need like that hour I was saying earlier, like just to have a moment or go work out. Like for me, working out, like you were saying, it just makes me feel great. Like sauna, weights, running, whatever it is, and just kind of makes you relaxed. And
well, I used to. I'm it's not so much anymore to look at.
Or skiing, whatever it is. Like just something.
Our dad was always really good at that, about separating the two. I mean, he would have through his career like nightmares and stuff would wake him up because of the stuff he saw. He could still talk. But I think one of his outlets was telling us stories, and he'd tell us some of the most twisted stories, or he'd want to show us like pictures, and we're just like, dude, Dad, I don't want to see that. I can't watch it.
Well, it does help to talk about.
Yeah, it helps him to talk about it.
It's similar to like military fathers who, those who've been in Vietnam. Some don't ask them about it. They don't want to talk about it. And others, when you talk about how to recover from a critical incident where something bad's happened, you have to find what works for you and stick with it. There's no one formula. And the tough part is, some people think that their way, something that would work for them, would work for somebody else, and they try to tell them, "Oh, this is what you need to do." And I said, "No, you need to shut up and you need to let me work on it." Doesn't mean you don't need help for something like that, but everybody's different in what's going to work for them.
Yeah, we had a buddy we went to the academy with, and I'm not going to use his name, but I don't talk to him anymore, because he was one of those guys that just
wore the hat and
couldn't let it go. And he was a really good dude in the academy, and he was our friend, I thought. And then he just did some things, and he just couldn't let the job go. Like, and he was successful. I mean, he was I think he worked for.
Don't go to too many details. You might start.
No, he went off and did. He was.
What's his name?
Yeah. But he just was.
I know that. Just give me his initials.
Just real quick, just a little bit. But I don't talk to him anymore. It just destroyed our relationship.
It brings you down.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we've all worked with people. It's us versus them, and And then my question is, okay, well, who's us and who's them? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like there's some really good guys. I mean, they just got caught on the wrong side of things, and I think they just screwed up. Like not every, because I worked in the jail for a little bit too, and not every one of those guys is an absolute horrible human being. I mean, some of them are just born
Got
the
screwed
wrong,
up, wrong way to go. Yeah.
And they've fixed themselves up, and
I guess because I do kind of want to get to the mass shooting topic. But for the hostage portion and the crisis negotiation portion, because this is kind of the doomsday for dads, if someone ever finds themselves inside a situation, now I know it's going to vary differently, widely. It's based on if you're with a family member who's kind of like has a motive, but say you're in like a true hostage situation, are there things people can do when you're inside the building with that individual to help the situation? Or is it pretty much, man, this thing is out of your control, you are just screwed, and hopefully the person like you on the outside is doing their job brilliantly to get them
basically,
out.
what can you do to help yourself?
Yeah, can you do anything to help yourself in those
Just
situations?
watch Die Hard and follow everything.
Got to get tactical.
I mean, you said it. Every situation's different. The bank robber I was talking about before did not do the stereotype of tying people up, and he didn't restrict their movement at all. And later on, years later, 7 years after the incident, I interviewed him, and he said, he goes, if they all got up and ran out, well, first of all, he had a pellet gun. He didn't have a real gun, but it certainly looked real. But he says, I wouldn't have done anything. And he goes, I guess it's smart that they didn't, but I never told them they couldn't leave. And in that incident, at least 4 people, we got word into them if they could get to the break room, they could get out a window. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, people said they had to go to the bathroom, and he never even stopped them. And then all of a sudden, he was down to 1 hostage. And it's a brilliant piece of audio to listen to him discovering that he had lost all his hostages. But in general, it's the best wisdom, it is to not stand out and not bring attention to yourself. But it really depends again on what if this is a violent person, you really want to try to personalize yourself as much as possible, and that could be dangerous as well. But what I mean by that is saying things like my son Jake is I need to pick him up at school. He's going to really he's going to be afraid that I'm not there. And putting that in that person's mind that this isn't just a pawn, this is a person who's got a life and a family. Mm-hmm. Kind of the cliche thing you hear is people say, "Oh, I have a family," but really get detailed about it. Give names, and if you don't want to give, you're afraid of giving your actual kids' names, and Jake is my son's name, is to make them up. And they're not going to fact check it. And they're like, I got your Facebook page. That's not your kid's name. But to have them see you as a person, obviously, try to be cooperative, but don't, hey, look who's calling. So
for those listening, it's his son.
Try to be, maybe he's listening in. Try to be cooperative.
You said my name, Dad.
Yeah.
But not overly so. Also, don't try not to be too helpful for them. Our bank robber, the last hostage, was a guy who was, in his mind, trying to keep the guy calm, so he became very helpful to him. Mm-hmm. And there was a period of time during that incident where we thought he was in on it. Oh, because he's always right next to the guy. Mm. And turns out later on, we found out he was trying to be helpful, and we got that guy on the phone at some point. And said, "Can you make it out of the bank?" Because everybody who came out before him said, "We've never seen a gun," and the guy just said that he had a gun, and we said, "Okay." And this wasn't the negotiator decision; this was command who decided we're just going to have this guy run out, and he did. He ran out, and then we're dealing with a single barricaded suspect, which is something that we deal with all the time. It was easy to deal with. And it's interesting because in the interview, the suspect said that before the guy ran out, he turned to him and he said, "I'm sorry." I'm sorry I'm leaving you.
Wow.
Jeez. And there's this factor of Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah, they formed a bond there.
Yeah, and there's one thing a lot of people, if you don't know what Stockholm syndrome is, there was a bank robbery, I believe it was in the 70s in Stockholm, Sweden, and 2 suspects and several hostages were in a bank vault for like 11 days.
Jesus,
and
that's a long time.
I think
when things finally, when the dust settled after everything, 1 or 2 of the, and there's been movies made about it, 2 of the female hostages had romantic relationships with these guys that they were, and you bond with people that you're in stressful situations with. The other way it manifests, and more so for law enforcement domestically, is that a negative opinion of law enforcement develops. And it's simple when you think about it, that if you cops weren't out there right now, this guy would leave and I wouldn't be a hostage right now. Mm-hmm. So why can't, and we've heard this exact phrase, why can't you just give him what he wants and so I can, get out of here? And that can lead to a lot of complications and difficulties. So kind of to find that balance where make sure they see you as a human being. Mm-hmm. If you're, unfortunately, held hostage, but don't be so, connected to them. And I think in that was a jewelry store robbery, and I think that so one of the suspects had gone to massage therapy school, and there was actually some massaging going on.
So weird.
Yeah, creepy and weird. So
those would be your nuggets to hold on to. Don't get too close. Try to so definitely don't be trying to fight or be that guy who's looking around for to weigh out to attack them or something. Or is there a time for that?
Well, and that's a tough one. You don't want to advise, if somebody's got a martial arts background and they know 100% that they can take the person out, but just be very, very careful about that. And one of the things that's got to be in the back of your mind, let's say you're in a situation and there's multiple people, unless you know every one of those other people, one of the people who looks like a victim could be a partner with the hostage taker. And so if you go to take action on that one person, that person's going to jump in as well. So be very, very, very careful about that. Opportunities do present themselves, but just be very careful about it. One thing I would say is law enforcement is acting on information that they have, and that information goes from completely false to somewhere in the middle. So if there's any opportunity to get information out, in that bank robbery, we had somebody emailing information out. But you have to understand that could be false information as well. Mm-hmm. We've had many opportunities to actually talk to hostages on the phone, but you always have to think that the hostage taker is listening in. Mm-hmm. So if you're able to get information out to law enforcement, do so. One thing that we try and do if we are able to get a hostage on the phone is ask yes or no questions. And it's, one of those questions might be, is he listening in? And even a no answer could be a yes answer. Yeah. So it's definitely not an easy situation.
Yeah, that's really scary. And I don't, it's not something you think about every day, but when you start to go down the whole kids thing, where are my kids, school, a mall, and just something that happened, if they get tied up in that kind of thing, what could you possibly tell them to do, because, if it's your spouse, someone might not necessarily be able to fight back. And, but I think that's good advice. And if I ever unfortunately find myself in a hostage situation, I'll try to employ some of it and see what happens.
Well, and too, if guns are involved or whatever else they have, explosives.
Well, yeah, if you're talking about
then that's
martial arts, hand-to-hand combat, and now you're trying to disarm somebody with a knife or a gun, that's scary. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are going to want to just sit back and try to blend in.
Well, we tell people this in if they're involved in an active shooter situation, that if it comes to a point where your only option is to fight, and same thing with a hostage situation, it should be a last resort. But if it is, you got to go 100%. Yeah. You can't. And a lot of people, kind of civilians and those who don't have a background in fighting or anything like that, they don't understand what it means to hit somebody as hard as you can. Mm-hmm. And that's really, you're in a fight for your life, and you have to deal with that. So mental preparation, doomsday, thinking you don't want to be paranoid that this is going to happen, but
Right.
you do want to have a little bit of mental visualization and understand that see yourself in this situation and what would you do, and see yourself succeeding and doing, acting 100% and putting 100% into it. And at least just not doing that all the time, because then,
Right.
somebody taps you on the shoulder and you knock them out. But just to keep that, in mind. And there's a lot of similarities in what we're talking about now and what happens if, God forbid, you're in a situation where somebody comes in and starts shooting. But understanding, kind of having a plan ahead of time. Best way to survive being a hostage is not to be a hostage.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So similar things with a shooting situation. When something starts, pay attention to that hair standing up on the back of your neck, because it means something. And looking around and knowing, how am I going to get out of here if I have to? The room that we're in right now, there's only one way out. So
Yeah, it sucks
that's,
for
and I got to go through you two guys who are in a lot better shape than I.
Hey, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the interview. As a reminder, Sergeant Harry Drucker will be joining us again next episode for how to survive a mass shooting if you're in that unfortunate circumstance. And until next time, stay sexy, stay safe. Later.
Thank you for listening. Bye.
You've been listening to the Dad's Doomsday Guide.
So enlightening. I loved it.
Get more episodes and videos at themadmachinist.com.
Superb.
Oh, hell yeah!